Hello, and welcome back to this damnful idealistic crusade. In this video, I'm going to go over the books I picked up in my last trip to McKay's bookstore, which, for those who aren't aware, is just about the most overwhelming physical media store you can step into. They sell virtually every form of physical media, and all of it is used. They get everything as trade-ins and offer a great amount of trade credit. Plus, their prices for most things is significantly lower than average, and especially on books most of all, you can get fantastic bargains. And so I go in there with $5 or $10 in my pocket and come out with way too much. And if I spent an entire day there, I would overdo it once more and probably need to rent a U-Haul truck. I try to go once a month, as that's usually the only way I keep myself from buying everything. But I'm able to search for various releases that I'm looking for transfer comparisons or doing audio captures, and I can usually find books for book collections that I'm working on. But I also try to bring in things that I don't need anymore, so it's a great way to actually free up what little space you have left that isn't filled with books or physical media somewhere. And I try to make it a regular habit of always trying to bring a box or two to trade in, but then I usually wind up coming back out with another box, so I break even essentially. But this time I managed to find quite a number of books, and I had trade credit burning a hole in my pocket. So since my last video, I had a lot of people saying that they wanted to see more haul videos. I figured I might as well go over the book haul for this time. And keep in mind, this was me with a bit of trade credit and spending about an hour in the store, and I managed to get all of these books in an hour for not much money. This place is dangerous for us book nerds. So I'll start with the handful of bargain paperbacks that jumped out at me, and so first is one of the later Robert Ludlum novels. It's actually credited to somebody else, so I think this is a book that was unfinished, or it was based on like a partial manuscript or something. So I picked up The Bancroft Strategy, and this oversized modern paperback that is extremely chunky because, as with anything with Ludlum's name on it, the page count is in the hundreds upon hundreds of pages. Now, I have not kept up with all of the modern books sold under the Ludlum name or branding. They did run the Jason Bourne character into the ground with, I think, well over a dozen continuation novels. I kind of checked out of those early on because they got really bad really quick, or at least very confusing, and they didn't feel like the original three books. But I do want to read every Ludlum major novel, and since this was apparently based on partially surviving Ludlum material, I figured why not, especially since it's in pretty solid shape. And as you can see, it was 25 cents, and I'm weak. Similarly, I'm trying to read every Frederick Forsyth novel at some point, so they had a copy of his novel The Deceiver, which is actually in pretty good shape, even though it's an older paperback. The spine has seen better days, but the actual condition of the paperback is still solid, so I was surprised. Even more surprising is that, as you can see here by the prices, this is actually a British paperback. So how in the world this ended up at a McKay's bookstore location, I don't know, but that's why I like to call it the physical media black hole. You never know what will turn up there or how it got there. I try to pick up any movie novelization that's in good shape and cheap because I'm such a fan of the format, and you never know when there will be some nice deleted scenes or something different, or a novelization that is completely different or better than the film it's based on. So they had a perfectly mint copy of the novelization for the Ridley Scott Robin Hood film, which has interesting stuff in it, even though it's definitely a bit of a hot mess as a Robin Hood film. But for 10 cents in absolutely perfect shape, I mean, how can you resist? Even the spine is in perfect shape, so I had to pick this up. They had a nice looking copy of the Damocles Sword. This is an original early paperback with this really cool special printing where you've got a photo insert, but the actual outer page, or outer cover, I should say, has a cutout of the actual dagger blade. This is apparently a World War II thriller about someone infiltrating the SS from the outside, and it just looked interesting enough, and the paperback is in really good condition. I try to make it a habit of picking up any books by certain publishers or imprints because I know I'll at least get my money's worth. One of those is the Classic Mysterious Press and the mysteries they would publish. So I found two in the Classic Brother Cadfael series, which is about a crime-solving monk, and these are, of course, by Ellis Peters. They all have these wonderful designs that are made to look like stained glass, and these were in perfect shape. I've read a little bit about this character, but I just started picking up anything that was Mysterious Press, and when you find Mysterious Press paperbacks in perfect shape for 10 cents each, I mean, you can't go wrong. Similarly, they had another Mysterious Press book, this A Mystery by Charlotte MacLeod, The Gladstone Bag, with a really nice cover, and it was only 5 cents, so you can see what this place does to a bookworm. A book collector will empty their wallet. You know, you could spend $100 in this place and you'll fill your car trunk within 5 minutes. Just a little bit of brown on the edges, but, you know, nothing major, perfectly fine. The spine's still in good shape, so I just had to get this too. And then lastly is a book that's also part of a series. So this is moving over into series books territory. I've picked up some books in this series, but I could never find a clean copy of book one, so I haven't read any yet. But I now finally found a clean copy of book one. So this is the first book in Peter David's Star Trek New Frontier series, which was a standalone series about a different crew, and it was basically branching off of Next Generation and some of the other 90s shows. Peter David is one of the best Star Trek writers and was a brilliant writer of comics and standalone fiction who unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, but also is the author of the phenomenal Batman Forever novelization, and he did other various movie tie-ins as well. But I've been curious about this series, and I've picked up one or two, but I wanted to start with book one, and lo and behold, they had this perfect copy for 75 cents, so of course I picked this up immediately. Now, remember how I just said a minute ago how sometimes you will randomly find British book editions in McKays and wonder how the heck did these get there? So I managed to find a whole stack of British paperback reprints of the classic Famous Five series, including the very first book. So here's the first book, Five on a Treasure Island. The series was by Enid Blyton and followed the adventures of 5 characters around, 3 boys, 1 girl, and a dog. They would basically have summer vacations and other things and wind up getting into adventure plots or having to solve mysteries. As a big fan of the Hardy Boys, I've heard of the Famous Five and been asked if I've read any. I've just never really gotten the chance to because this series, while beloved in Britain, it hasn't really translated over here in terms of success in the US. So I was really shocked to find several of these. This edition is from 1991 and has really nice artwork and a pretty cool cover design that makes it part of the series. You've also got a nice spine with the spine numbering, and all of this carries on to the rear, and of course clearly indicates that this is a British edition. Now, there were 21 books in the original series, which started in the 40s and ran to the early 1960s, I believe. So this is the penultimate book, book 20, again in the same nice early 90s reprint series. Really nice artwork. Have the spine that matches and then the rear. So these were a real surprise to find. And then they had some different paperbacks with different numbering, which did throw me for a second at first, but then I actually took a closer look and found that these are a unique spin-off series. So these Famous Five books, again, British paperback editions, nice artwork, but with different numbering. These are actually English translations of a completely separate French series using the characters. This series lasted for about 24 books, and only the first 19 were translated into English, so I guess there's 19 in this paperback series. But they changed the titles, of course, and they also have different numbering, so there is a little bit of difference between these and the original original French books. I had Book 9, The Famous Five, and the Inca God. I mean, that screams adventure, and you want to have your kid characters in mortal peril. I mean, that's how you sell a kid's book. Same matching spine and rear cover. Book 11 is The Strange Legacy. Again, same overall design aesthetic. Book 12 is Secret of the Caves, so I guess the English translators didn't mind borrowing the title of the iconic 7th Hardy Boys book, but that's just something a Hardy Boys geek is going to immediately notice. And then Book 18 in these reprints, The Famous Five and The Pink Pearls. So these were all 90 cents each and in perfectly good shape. So I really was surprised to find these, as I've never actually seen a Famous Five book in the wild. I've kept an eye out for them as one of the classic children's adventure mystery series that I've heard about or been asked about and just not gotten to read. But I didn't expect to suddenly find a stack of British paperbacks or the English translations of the French versions. One of my primary reasons for visiting McKays is that they always seem to get a decent amount of Hardy Boys editions traded in here and there. The condition, of course, varies, and it usually takes a while for there to be anything new that comes through, but every once in a while there's a collection that gets traded in, or suddenly there's some vintage editions mixed in. They didn't have anything this time, but over in the juvenile section, they actually have some of the modern or later attempts at bringing the boys and the characters to even younger readers. So I never intended on collecting all of the young readers' books, but they were so mint and so cheap that I've been picking some of these up here and there, and so I've now been collecting the Secret Files series. So they had 3 of them, books 10, 11, and 12, and they were absolutely perfect, like you had just gotten them at a chain bookstore, and they were only 50 cents each. So as a Hardy Boys completist, that's why I've started picking some of these up, as I had originally intended to stop at the Hardy Boys Adventures and then Hardy Boys Undercover Brothers. Even though I'm not really a fan of the modern series, I still wanted to collect everything, and so if the books for younger readers start popping up for less than $1 or sometimes less than 50 cents, then I can't say no. And again, these are in perfect shape. There's just a little bit of page browning that starts to happen because they use cheaper paper on these. But, these are okay for what they are. They're obviously not intended for adult collectors, but, if you're a collector and you're buying all the other books, you might as well get these too. And they do have some basic illustrations throughout. So, they have their own charm and they serve their purpose. And it's nice that the boys are being brought to younger readers in at least some form. They didn't have anything in terms of James Bond novels until I saw this poking out of the bargain section, and the condition was so good overall, and the price was so absurdly cheap that I just decided to pick it up anyway, even though I already have a solid copy of the paperback novelization, but it was 5 cents. I mean, when a book is 5 cents, you really can't lose, especially when it's a perfect looking copy of John Gardner's License to Kill novelization with very little wear on the cover corners, just a little bit of wear on the top. Still has the original gloss finish, the embossing, everything. You've got some browning of the pages, but most of the yellow edges are intact. There's a little bit of wear. So obviously it's not in perfect shape, but this is definitely the cleanest copy of the novelization tie-in that I've seen in a long time. I mean, even the spine is pretty solid. I've kind of made it a habit to pick up any Bond edition that's in good shape that's really cheap, especially at McKay's, because typically I can upgrade my own copies every once in a while, or if I know anybody who's trying to get all the books and I can pass on some good editions that I picked up, then I try to do that, because the Bond novels and the tie-ins and the novelizations, they come and go in terms of how frequently they pop up in bookstores bookstores, and usually they're pretty beat up. So every once in a while, when I see something like this that's so absurdly cheap, then it immediately goes into my cart because again, look at how good this is in terms of condition. I mean, it's not something you see every day for a nickel. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about some adult westerns because, of course, I'm now hooked on these things and I can't stop reading them. McKays basically has a whole cubbyhole shelf or two of various Western paperback series and adult Westerns that doesn't fit another classification. So I just look through it and see if there's anything interesting that's in good shape for cheap, because it's like an adult Western mystery box. So I found book 10 in an interesting looking series, which is called Headhunter, which is a female action hero who is basically going around the West acting as bounty hunter and badass, and I guess sleeping with a bunch of dudes because this is an adult Western. What's nice about this, it's got a painted cover and it's got a gloss finish, so it's got a fancier cover. This is apparently a much less common series. I hadn't even heard of it, and I had to actually look around online to find out how many books there were. So there's not a lot of information about it. But anytime there's a Western series with a female lead character, that gets my interest because there weren't a whole lot of them. And even if it's, halfway decent, it should be a nice change of pace. But I was just suckered in by the cover, and it's got a nice gloss finish, and some of the blurbs were just too good to pass up. Like the first sentence on the back: "Her blood hot after some hard desert lovin' along the trail to Dos Cabezas. Charity Rose mounts up for tough new action down Oklahoma way. Hundreds of hard cases are holed up in the treacherous territory called the Indian Nations, just out of reach of hangin' Judge Isaac Parker and his small band of marshals. With bounty money waiting to be had, she aims to take in as many wanted men as she can handle." And I'm sure that's going to be more than just bounty collecting, since this is an adult Western. And the second paragraph promises more. "Teaming up with Lauren Baker, a lusty young lawman with a hankering for cash and glory about as big as his powerful gun." I'm sure there's going to be more things that are large. "Charity has her hands full teaching him some of her own tricks of the trade. Their irons cocked and ready." I'm sure there's going to be more in this book that is cocked besides firearms. "They push hard through an army of corrupt Indian police and backstabbing manhunters, winding up with a passel of high-priced prisoners headed for the noose. But when the Sanford boys bushwhack them to free their little brother Ned, Charity stands firm, pumping enough hot lead down their throats to blow them to hell and back." So yes, this just looked too promising and had a cool, glossy, painted cover. But this is book 10, entitled Red Hot Roundup. The series ran for apparently a little over 10 books, but I just grabbed this because it was cheap. I had trade credit, and it's a female-led adult Western, so I was ultra curious. Now, that amount of books would have been a nice haul, and you can see the incredible value you can get at McKay's. And if I'd stopped there, I may have not actually spent anything in terms of the trade credit I had. But speaking of adult Westerns and collecting series books, all of a sudden, a particular shelf that had been empty for some time had been restocked with fresh trade-ins, and most of them were in very good shape, including earlier volumes, which are much harder to find, and they were all only $1.50 each, and I had trade credit. So, they had some Gunsmith editions. If you can't tell, I've become addicted to the Gunsmith series. It is easily the finest of the adult Westerns, and everyone I've read so far is absolutely great. So, of course, I bought 30 more. Now to not drop them. Now, the Gunsmith was one of the major series of the adult Western boom in the 1980s and 1990s, alongside the Trailsmen, Long Arm, and the Slocum series. But unlike those, the Gunsmith was written by one author for all that time. So Robert Randisi wrote under the J.R. Roberts pseudonym, and wrote about the character of Clint Adams, known as the Gunsmith, who basically wandered through the West. He had been a deputy marshal, he was a gentleman, he was an expert gambler, and basically was going around righting wrongs and sleeping with every beautiful woman that he encountered. Except Clint Adams was a gentleman and actually likes women, and so the required sex scenes of the adult Western don't feel quite as forced in Gunsmith books, and the writing quality is so good that it is far above what an adult Western called for or required. So each Gunsmith book is a standalone adventure that is completely satisfying, and you pick up one of these and you basically have to finish it before you can put it down. Plus, they're usually about 180 pages, so you can read them in one sitting. Now, the earlier books look more like this. They have the brown logo instead of the later red logo that was used on all of the books, but it has already set the design parameters by this point on book 43. You've got an image of Clint Adams with the scar on his face, and then you've got various elements from the book. This is mixing in elements of Japanese culture because this has Japanese ambassadors going around with a priceless statue that gets stolen, and the gunsmith has to intervene. And of course, there will be lovemaking with beautiful women. Now, the earliest books in the series, I believe it's the first 13, those were written in the first person, but then the publishers requested that the series be changed, and so the rest of the series is different. So it's only the earliest books that are directly from the lead character's perspective. I haven't gotten to read one of those yet. I can only assume that it'll feel a little bit different, and I will say that I've read some of the earlier books, and they do feel maybe a tinge grittier, and you can tell that they're being made when the adult Western boom had really erupted in the early to mid 80s. But with anything where you have one writer writing a whole series, you can tell a difference between the early books and the middle books and the later books. What's astounding is that once you add in the giant volumes, which are basically double length, and then the various spin-offs, Randisi wrote over 500 Gunsmith standalone books, in addition to his ridiculously prolific output. So I've become a fan of his simply from his amazing Gunsmiths, so now I want to check out his other fiction. But it's really tough getting the early books in particular of the Gunsmith series in good condition. They also used a different paper, and they're older, so you typically find the earlier books looking more like this, where the pages have gone brown to some degree. The other problem you face is that they're typically, well loved, and really the word that fits more is they've been abused over the years. And a lot of adult Western readers typically seem to have been heavy smokers. So it's difficult to find any of really the first 50 to 75 books, but especially the early books like this that have the brown logo in not destroyed shape or smelling like they were in a smoky room for 30 or 40 years. And most of all, it's difficult to find mint copies of the first 10 or 15 books. So anytime I can find an earlier one that's before the red logo came in and it's in good readable shape and it doesn't stink and it's not destroyed, then I'm really excited because that's very difficult to find. So to go through the rest of these in number order so you can see how the early books transition over into the red logo and so on, I'll just quickly show all of these because I picked up so many I can't talk about each one. I've still got to work off the price stickers. McKay stickers are a little bit tricky. They can be a little bit frustrating, but as long as you're patient and you just use a hairdryer on low, that typically is the best solution. But all of these early copies are in really good shape. Some have some old bookstore stamps on the top, but nothing major. And compared to what I usually see these in condition-wise, I snapped all of these up. Here's book 68. Again, apologies for not yet working off all the stickers. You got to spend some time, and since I've basically got 30 more gunsmiths to do this with now, I just haven't had a chance to patiently work off all the stickers. But again, the condition just keeps improving, and this is some of the best I've seen for condition of earlier books in the series. The overall design remained the same in terms of white paperback and the rear covers. It's just the front cover artwork and logo would slightly update over the years. Here's book 71. Some of these are a little bit more worn than others, but again, nothing bad. And it's so hard finding Gunsmiths or any adult Western series book in good readable shape that, as long as it's in good overall solid condition, I just snap it up. Here's book 74, Plains Murder. It's also kind of fun because all of these books have nice pulpy enough titles that I can read in my preferred trailer voice. Volume 76, The Nevada Timber War. Just some basic spine wear. Book 77, New Mexico Showdown. Just some basic spine creasing and wear. I love the title of book 86, Message from a Dead Man. I mean, how can you resist a book with that title? Book 89, Blood on the Land. Then we jump to volume 122 with the traditional red logo that was used for most of the series. So this is typically the type of edition you'll find, but it's kept the same design with Clint Adams somewhere in the center with black hat and scarred cheek. Here's volume 166, The Wolf Teacher. This has some extra stickers on it that I'll have to work off, but still in pretty solid shape. Again, just some spine wear. This one a little bit heavier, but nothing terrible. This one's a little bit more dirty on the back, but again, compared to what these can look like, this is perfectly fine. Then we jump forward to volume 210 with Maximilian's Treasure. Now this is, of course, several years down the road. The covers have more of a gloss finish, and they've tweaked the art style to have more of that sort of illustrated romance novel cover aesthetic. But you've still got Clint Adams in the center, and you've still got elements directly adapting things from the book. So each is unique to the individual book, but also part of the same whole, which is a really nice touch. The spine's in great shape, and as this is getting later in the series, you can usually find these in better condition. And you also get the nice added benefit of having nostalgia if you ever picked up books at Kmart, as obviously somebody did with this book. And I picked up 216, which has a title that has made me want to read it ever since I saw it in the book list. The Man from Peculiar. Solid spine, and the rear cover with the lovely blurb title, Divine Justice. Then we have volume 218, The Cleveland Connection. Solid spine and rear cover. Volume 227, Safe Town. And this, of course, has a variety of stickers. That's going to be a challenge to work off, but I shall try. Condition-wise, this one had a little bit more browning on the pages, but nothing out of the ordinary for one of these. The spine's still solid. And then another fun Kmart sticker on the back. Volume 236, The Cherokee Strip. Spine and rear cover with the great blurb title, Delivery of Death. Volume 244 looks really interesting with the title, The Shadow of the Gunsmith. And at this point on the covers, they started mixing in more of what looks like actual photos, given a little bit of treatment. So I think they started opting for this photo montage design as some of the other adult westerns, like the long arm books that were still going as well, had started using that sort of aesthetic. But at least the Gunsmith still kept the original series aesthetic and made everything work. And you've still got pretty nice glossy covers. It's just this cover has some wear on the top, but otherwise it's still solid. Volume 250, The Doomsday Riders. Spine and rear cover. Volume 309, Outlaws Reckoning. Spine. I love the blurb title, Gunning for Redemption. Volume 315,
The Madam of Silver Junction.
So this one looks interesting because it's about a former friend of Clint Adams who's been killed, but no one seems to want to do anything about her murder because she had become the local madam and owner of the brothel. So, of course, the gunsmith steps in to right wrongs and find out who murdered his friend, and doesn't care that everyone else in town, obviously, looks down upon that profession. Here's volume 317,
The Valley of the Wendigo,
which is moving into possibly supernatural territory, as the Wendigo is a supernatural legend of some sort of mythical creature. So it'll be interesting to see how the Gunsmith deals with that sort of story. Volume 323,
A Daughter's Revenge.
and as you can see, I guess this is an old Dollar General price sticker, maybe. You see that on some later Gunsmiths, as they seem to have been sold there. Spine solid, little bit of damage on the rear cover, but still otherwise in solid shape. Volume 340,
The Bisbee Massacre.
spine and rear cover.
Another tombstone in Tombstone.
I mean, with a blurb like that, you can't resist. We've got volume 342,
The Last Trail Drive.
This one actually has the original store sticker from Books A Million. I'd know that type of sticker anywhere. Volume 345 with the great title,
Someone Else's Trouble.
and again, this one with a Books A Million sticker still on it. Volume 359 with the beautiful title of
Two Guns for Vengeance.
Volume 395.
The Three Mercenaries.
I love how they finally updated the over 5 million books in print to, as you can see here, 15 million now. I don't know exactly how many books they sold, but it had to be a substantial amount for the series to continue. And then volume 399, which is
Death in the Family.
Now, this is the last standard edition that I picked up, and if you were wondering just how long this series lasted, that started in the early 1980s, this is book 399, and as you can see, it's now credited under Penguin instead of Jove, because this book is actually from 2015, and Randisi was still not done, so the books continued even into later on being done as, I believe, print on demand and with different cover designs, and the main number series reached almost number 500. So he wrote almost 500 in the standard series, and then a number of giant books plus spin-offs. Now, by giant, I mean literally double length. So here is one of the two giant editions I picked up, which is
Showdown at Little Misery.
It's got the same design aesthetic, except things are tweaked slightly to show that it is a special giant edition with giant action and giant adventure. But this is basically a double-length story, which allows things to get fleshed out a little bit more, get more characterization and detail, and you get to just spend more time on a Gunsmith adventure than the standard 180-page volume. But it was really cool to find some of these because they do not pop up as much. And when they do, it's just the same ones and they're pretty trash. So it was nice to find one of the earlier ones. And then I picked up a second giant edition they had. This is a later one from 2013, which is The Further Adventures of James Butler Hickok, which, as the title would indicate, is about Wild Bill. And Clint Adams is actually an old friend of Wild Bill's, as in the books, you do have occasional meetings of historical figures. And this book is apparently about the Clint Adams dealing with a writer who wants to write about Wild Bill and basically tell tall tales and insult his character. And so he takes offense to that because Clint Adams is an old friend of Wild Bill's. And in the Gunsmith series, you do have moments where various historical figures do pop up in the books, and it's nice to see how Randisi actually works them in and keeps them feeling appropriate to their actual demeanor, but also in terms of what they were doing at the time and historical events, and working that into a fictional Gunsmith story. But this should be really fun, as it's a whole double novel length story of the Gunsmith going to meet his old friend, and also trying to keep his name from being sullied by irresponsible writers. So this is what I picked up in my last trip to McKay's bookstore, and this was the result of having some trade credit and running around the store for an hour. This is the type of damage you can do to your wallet or your lack of space if you go into a McKay's bookstore for just an hour. The real reason why I made this video is because I stumbled across a whole shelf full of Gunsmith editions. There were a handful more that I didn't pick up because I do try to at least exercise some restraint, but their condition was nowhere near as good as these. I might get some more of those later because I am determined to read every Gunsmith book because every one I've read has been great and extremely enjoyable, but also because they don't pop up that often, and when they do, so long as they're not destroyed, you're better off to just go ahead and get that because you're likely not going to stumble across that particular volume anytime soon or possibly ever again. It's very sporadic what books turn up. And before this point, I hadn't seen anything but a random single volume or two appear. It's been pretty dry in terms of the Gunsmith shelf has been empty for months now. And so all of a sudden having 30 plus books turn up and getting to pick out the 30 that were in good shape, and I had trade credit, that meant I was getting all of them. There was no question. So for all of these books, though, with the trade credit I had, I spent well under $30. So this was about, well, with tax, it was basically about $29 or $30. And for the sheer volume of books that I picked up, that is a fantastic bargain, especially if you look at what some of these books go for just paying eBay prices with shipping and tax. Just trying to get lots of adult Westerns, particularly Gunsmith books, is very difficult because most sellers don't describe the condition, or if they had been owned by a chain smoker for 40 years, all the stuff you need to know. And they typically don't give you close-up photos, or they don't actually give you a photo of what the pages look like, because in really bad shape, the pages can be like completely browned. So you want to avoid those. And plus, they're usually a bit pricey once you add in tax and shipping. So it's difficult picking up adult Westerns on eBay because you can't verify condition very easily. And it's much more expensive than paying $1.50 per book and then having a bunch of trade credit in your pocket. And it's like somebody said, "Oh yeah, we knew you were coming in. Here's 30 Gunsmiths." And I'm like, "Yes, give them all to me now." So if this video has any message, it's try reading The Gunsmith because it's a fantastic series, even if the adult Western mandate was you had to have a sex scene inserted usually every 3 to 4 chapters somewhere. But the Gunsmiths are so good and the writing is so good that that's not even a detriment at all. So that's what I picked up at McKay's books this time around. I'll probably go one more time towards the end of the month. And again, I do try to bring stuff to trade in, so I at least keep some things going out while more physical media is coming in, and I have to figure out, okay, how am I going to fit this somewhere? What have I done? That's usually the phrase that you have when you leave McKay's with, I took 2 boxes of stuff to trade in, and I came out with like all that you see behind me, and I'm walking out like this, and I'm like, what have I done? I've done it again! So yeah, you'll find yourself doing that if you have one of their wonderful stores in your area. If you've never been to one, I cannot recommend it enough, but set aside at least the entire day because the store is so massive that you will just get lost in the shelves, and it's like a gigantic physical media flea market in a way because there's so much stuff there and the prices are so low on most things that you just fill up a basket or a cart and then you have to just scrutinize and figure out how much you're spending. But the bargains are sensational, and every once in a while you get lucky and find a whole shelf full of a series you're trying to collect. So as always, I hope my babblings about bookstore hunting and collecting books has been at least somewhat fun and informative. I'll try to keep doing these regularly whenever I find something really cool or I get a ton of books at McKay's for very little money. As always, please do keep supporting your local independent bookstores who need all of your help and support to stay in business. Keep reading print books, and thank you ever so much for watching. I have a lot of Gunsmiths to read, and I cannot wait to read every single one of these.